change in the fundraising sector has never been greater. But innovations in technology are evolving faster than our ability to understand them. Are these advances good or bad? Do they have unintended consequences? And what is the application to the global fundraising sector? That's what we're here to find out. Welcome to the Fundraising AI Podcast, your up-to-date resource for responsible AI for the global fundraising community, hosted by Nathan Chappell and Scott Rosenkrantz.
Welcome back, everyone. This is episode 29 of the Fundraising AI Podcast. I know the number, but with Nathan not being here, I'm all lost. So episode 29, I believe, and I am here with a very special guest, Dan Kershaw, Executive Director of Furniture Bank. Dan, you and I, we know each other. We officially met back in, was that January of this year?
Thereabouts.
AFP
Yep.
Icon. We were in your backyard. You had already been talking to Nathan. You've been following along with Fundraising AI for a while, using some of the resources, and you and I had a chance to officially meet. And I mean, I was just at first talk, I was just blown away by what you were doing. It's so different than what we usually run into when we're talking to nonprofits, and they're not just using of AI, but feeling of AI, right? So like, you're just in a completely different place. And I really want to learn more about how you got to where you are, and then where you see it going, and how you found the relationship with Fundraising AI helpful that you think might be able to assist others.
Be happy to.
Good. Cool. So why don't we?
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
Yeah. Why don't we just get started? Give us a little bit of your trajectory. How'd you get to here?
Yeah, so I'm 11 years new to the social sector. Previous to that, I was after environmental masters, like I then did my MBA at Ivy in Canada, and got pulled into the tech sector. There was a time where I had lots of hair and it was bright red, and I had computers. So I've always been intrigued by what is possible by being curious. And so I was at Nortel, dealt with the year 2 K-Bug, and then I got the call from one of my classmates. He's like, got this top secret startup. And then from 99 onward, I was pulled into startups. And what I find really interesting being in our social sector is many of the motivations and behaviors of a startup are very similar to nonprofits, except mindset. And they both have missions. They both have goals. They're both resource constrained. They're both trying to change the world.
And usually scrappy.
But yes, have to be.
Yeah, under-resourced, overworked.
And so, you pick any startup, they're going to have the same attributes. But pick any nonprofit, they have the same thing. But we run into different mindsets and different constraints, with legal constraints of what we can and can't do. And so when I arrived, in terms of that startup, was browser-based internet gambling, building the software for that industry. Fascinating industry, an industry where there weren't rules, or the rules changed every week. Which, like, imagine a sector where the rules and the laws changed every week, and you had to change your product to remain compliant. So I kind of got used to change. And it being perfectly fine, it wouldn't kill you, but you would have to be nimble. Ended up in payment processing, e-commerce. So the whole mobile dating, I remember holding up the first iPhone going, wow, this is going to change things. And then, I won't tell you my whole life story, but ultimately a recruiter out of the blue called me while I was doing some of my own consulting. He said, you ever thought of working in a charity? And I said some very inappropriate things at the time, but after a lot of interviews, I got a career with meaning, because I think my personal journey is every bad story usually involved a shareholder and their motivations to maximize profit for their own pockets rather than helping their staff or the community. And I never considered coming into this sector until suddenly I was in it. And when I arrived at Furniture Bank, it had digital, but it was still very addicted to clipboards and paper, and the nature of what we do. The types of principles you'd apply in a for-profit could easily be applied to the charity. So we started. We did it, started slow. So Most people don't know what a furniture bank is. So
Right.
the good news is once you can't unknow.
Yeah.
So here in the United States and Canada, there are organizations like my organization that are dealing with a very specific aspect of poverty. It's one that you can't see. It's one that's behind the doors of the housing that tens of millions of people can barely afford. And you have children sleeping on floors. You have parents gathering around a milk crate for dinner, having one pot to work with, and all sorts of things, because furniture, things I didn't know, is the third most expensive thing you will ever spend money on in your life and my life, all of our lives. But when you're coming out of crisis, you have no money.
Yeah.
And there are no social programs generally that are there to give you $8,000 to take an empty space and fully equip it to be successful. So Furniture Bank, we've been around 26 years, and we're supporting nearly 4,000 families every year to receive the goods that they need to establish a home. So and we do that. Well, I'll let you cut that one out.
No, in your work with them, you're giving them the resources they need, the furniture, the housing, everything to fill that house, and the tools to establish themselves as well.
Yes. So think of it as tangible items. So every social issue we have, people are coming through crises. They're working with all of the other nonprofits in the sector. And there's a moment in time when everybody's ready for housing.
Right.
In North America, housing generally comes empty. And we're there for that moment in time when keys are coming, that when they move in, there are beds for their kids, there are dining room tables to eat at, there are pots and pans to cook at, there's school desks to study at, and all the things that we need, because none of us can be successful. You and I are sitting in office chairs. Well, what if we didn't have one and we had to do this podcast? The social and physical and mental damage that comes when families don't have these assets is tremendous. So what we're trying to do is, on the other hand, you have 12 million tons of furniture and home goods being destroyed every year in landfills and incinerators. So the startup guy, Dan, is like, it's the logistics issue. There's lots of stuff being destroyed for not good reasons. And there's tens of millions of people who can never afford them. This is a matching exercise. Now, that's a very optimistic view, but that's what gets me up out of bed every day, is that if everybody has the goods, then they have the opportunity to be successful in the communities in which they live.
I mean, it is just such incredible work you do. And I remember when you shared furniture poverty with me, it was something that I had no idea existed. I never thought about it. But you're right.
I didn't either. So we have delivery teams going out every day, and the delivery teams, if they're delivering, so that the model, the families will come in and select the items from the showroom of what we've been able to get from the community over the last 72 hours. So a mother and volunteer will go around a showroom and are individually selecting what a home means to them. And then we deliver those goods the next day. And the feedback we get from the teams is sometimes they've already moved in. And, kids are literally sleeping on floors in beds of clothes. That's not one child. That's tens of thousands of children who have I can't invite friends over. I can't study. I can't and it's not a small issue. And that's what really surprised me. Is actually quite a huge issue, but it's when we as charities are out trying to raise awareness on things, it's invisible, because we had an issue where we've written stories of the work that we do and the impact that we've had on those families, but we didn't have photos, because how can any of us go in with a camera and say, let us take a picture of your child sleeping on the floor?
Right.
That strays into poverty porn, which none of us want. And so I've met families that have received the gift of furniture, the gift of a home 10, 15 years later, and they're VPs, they're school teachers, they're all the things that we want them to be. And it's just that intervention that let them be successful or keep their family together or bring their family off from overseas or go back to school or any of the one of the things that we need to do to move on with our lives. So we know it's critical. We know it's a big issue. We know it's solvable. But the big part is we all hate moving furniture. And, we're chasing essentially in-kind donations at scale. We don't sell the goods.
Right.
We give them away.
Right.
So many organizations, they get the in-kind goods and they sell them to fund their programs. Ours is, Scott, if our team came to your house and took your sofa, it would be in a new home in 72 hours.
Wow.
So we got into social enterprise model where we essentially compete with junkers.
Okay.
Here in Toronto, there are 30 junking companies. 25% of what they collect is furniture and home goods, and they destroy it all. They race to the local landfill and off to the next job. So we are there to be the socially, environmentally responsible option. So that funds the residential, commercial, and government social enterprises we have, fund about 80% of our operating needs. 53 employees, 13 trucks. It's logistically very busy, but we're only just scratching the need in the community. So for us, it's always, how do we grow our social enterprise to create the margin to make the next investment? And for that other 20% to give people, as you talk about on the podcast, we're in the business of trust. We're in that TikTok world where our attention spans are finite or non-existent.
Right.
So how do you convince very busy people to trust us that we're doing right by your donation, be it an in-kind donation or financial donation? And that's how we've been really leveraging automation to augment the work we do with our great team, and also do new things that we never thought were possible, leveraging generative AI.
So I know you have a number of use cases of how you're using this that I want to get into, but I want to go back 11 years ago. You're in this sector that you've never been in before. You've been in a kind of a mirror sector of scrappiness, nimbleness, right? But doing good is different than where you've been. But you have that curious mindset, which we always talk about is key, right? You're familiar with technology, so you're not wary of it. Where did you first, when did it first come into your mind, hey, here's a problem and here's AI as a potential solution? What was that first puzzle piece for you?
So applying technology to the problems of the charity from day one. So we had pieces, but they were organized incorrectly the way a for-profit would, because we had a social enterprise model. The idea of marketing and doing sort of direct to consumer and all the best practices you would if you were a startup, that was both the skill sets and the mindset weren't there. So we had a social enterprise that was literally buried on the website, and yet it provided us the cash flow and the furniture that we needed to give to our families. So that early days was really leveraging the more tech to reach more, do more, and be more efficient. We applied that into impact measurement and things like that, where the real pivot around being more AI augmented. And I use the word augmented because there's a lot of conversation about AI is going to do it all.
Right.
I'm as of this moment, AI can't do it all, isn't going to do it all. As it relates to Furniture Bank, there's no AI that's going to pick up random furniture of every shape, size, color, vintage, ever. So our social employment program, social enterprise, is going to be live and well.
Yeah.
But it does create opportunities that were never possible beforehand. So when we run on Salesforce, we use different marketing platforms like HubSpot or Slack, where we've got a complicated tech stack that most charities wouldn't. But part of it was it always comes back to why. So back then, pre-AI, why was people are 70% of our budget, 52 employees right now. So applying technology to amplify the impact of one employee was a no-brainer. Simplify. So we did time and motion studies. This process is taking 2 hours. What if it only took an hour? Then maybe we could see one more family. So we implemented iPads and broke our clipboard addiction, wandering around the showroom and manually checking things off. We saw an immediate increase in the number of families we could reach. And And I think that's my role is like, I'm effectively chief digital officer, but until people believe that they can do it, it's trapped within me, within the leader, within the organization,
Right.
as that digitally curious person. So my job was to say, we're going to find ways to digitize. It's okay to experiment. But ultimately, once the team started to see the momentum, the progress, it became theirs.
Right.
And that automation continued. So a lot of that automation happened earlier on, and it's the Gen AI piece, which is exciting because it's doing things that we would never economically do the old way. So the whole parking the efficacy of going in and photographing 40 families behind closed doors in squalor, we'll park the ethics of that. It's not. To pay a film crew to do that, the coordination, all of that was many tens of thousands of dollars.
Right.
And how many funders are like, take my money and go do marketing?
Right.
Said no funder ever. And yet I had been dabbling with Midjourney, and there was version 3 in July, and I had 40 pages of stories that were lovingly handcrafted and written by families that we've made it, that explain and describe in horrifying detail what it's like to sleep on a floor. And that's where we started to experiment. So, and that's the important part. I often bring up Ethan Mollick. He talks about the jagged frontier, is that each one of us need AI to work a certain way. And every time we test it, sometimes we're going to be surprised and sometimes we're going to be disappointed. So I'm always testing what's possible, knowing I'm probably not going to be happy with it. So we did that annual campaign, which was, we call it, the picture isn't real, the reality is. And we were able to get Midjourney, and that was hard. Actually, the hardest part was actually because it doesn't have the training. It knows what an empty room looks like, and it knows what homelessness on a street looks like. But the imagining what essentially homelessness inside of housing, it was the hardest part because the training data didn't think it happened. Mm-hmm. But what we were able to do is launch a campaign where we thanked our donors for the sofa or the dining room table, so essentially completing rooms. And we sent them an example of the type of family in the story that their donation of goods had helped address. And that began just the little, I use a baseball metaphor, bunting my way around different places, different tools. And I think that's the important message to everybody. I was saying just before we started, 76% of all nonprofits and charities in the United States and Canada have 5 or less employees.
Yeah.
That's of 2 million nonprofits. So most of us are tiny. Most of us are resource constrained. And when I saw that it gave me new capabilities that I could never do, that's not talked about enough. Mm-hmm. We talk about automating existing processes. We don't talk about doing things that were impossible without generative AI or predictive AI. So we're now looking at ways to be more responsive, be more, meet our clients where they are. And they're little experiments. I think the first really big investment is we're just in the process of implementing an AI augmented phone system. So that when we're talking with donors, because listeners may say, well, it's a phone system. Like, how much AI do you need? But you have to remember, when people are calling with their furniture, they're coming from different moments of furniture. From the time my girlfriend says, you're not moving your futon into our very first apartment, to we're getting married, to we're having kids, we're downsizing, we're moving into a home. And when I leave, we all have these moments. So we can now train the AIs to listen for the cues about the type of situation. Mm-hmm. So we talk about, in fundraising, we talk about stewardship and all of the best practices. We can actually lay it in there to be listening for the cues to then help our donor associates help people through navigating that. I don't want to see my father's leather armchair that I read Tolkien with,
Right.
destroyed by Junker.
Right.
I want to see that product passed on. So we're using AI to both help train new staff and existing staff, but also be able to help make sure that the type of information we have out in the public, the questions that everybody asks, we now have that insight, because those words can become, that are spoken, can become written, and then we can create additional content and stewardship emails and videos and things like that. So that's probably the biggest investment so far. But we did it here in Toronto. We've got, my numbers are wrong, but magnitudes are right. 200 different languages that notionally could come through our doors on any day. So historically, if you go into any small nonprofit and said, do you translate in 200 languages? All of us would say no. And yet when ChatGPT 4.0 came out, I saw the little voice demo. So I tried it. And yes, you literally, if you haven't, pull it out, find somebody who speaks another language, and do the following prompt. When you hear insert language, Spanish, or in our case, the test I did was Urdu. When you hear Urdu, say it back to me in English. And when you hear English, say it in Urdu. So now our volunteers, we're piloting this. It's not like ready for production, but we're piloting it with one volunteer that when they get somebody who has a second language to English, they can run that in GPT, and they have a reasonable chance of having a conversation, because those families have only 45 minutes to build a home. And we can strip out that communication challenge. So it's coming back to curiosity and why are we using it? We wake up every day, how do we help one more family, 10 more families, 1,000 more families, 1 million more families? AI is not going to solve the million. That's where business partners and residential and everybody listening to Fundraise Up saying, have you heard of a furniture bank? Because if you knew, when you have good quality items, that they can be passed back into the community all across, not just Toronto, but all across North America. So we are, and every day, as like every week, it's hard to keep up with the tools. But then back to who I am is I'm curious. And I'm looking at the tool. How can I apply it to my job, my fundraiser's job, my ops person's job, changing a whole function? My new controller, we've got Power BI, and he's like, what's that Copilot button? When you go look at it, is like, if you do the work, it can actually start spitting back and highlighting this trend is going offside, like actually be proactive and warning you on things. So we're, again, long way off from that. This is a marathon for all of us.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, one of the reasons I'm so excited. Yes, it's going to be great for Furniture Bank, but why I love talking to people like yourself is it can free up so much free time to do more important things that we should all be leaning into it. And as you highlight often on the program, if we don't catch up to for-profits, the for-profits are going to set the standard and the training and the learnings, and we're going to be left behind. But to start isn't hard. To start is read a book, listen to a podcast, try an experiment, share it with friends in your office, and then you start your journey. And you'll move as fast as your organization is comfortable moving.
And I think you've laid out so many lessons. I mean, explicitly and implicitly in what you said there, right? Like, first off, curiosity. Again, curiosity is key in doing this, right? It's also, in your case, it's coming from leadership. So leadership has the buy-in and seeing that this is going to be the only way that we're going to be able to effectively move our organization in the way we need to and at the speed we need to without significant increase in resources, right?
100%.
So everyone at the levels below you see like, okay, this is a directive coming from, but also a directive in an open and vulnerable and collaborative environment, right?
Make mistakes.
And it's not, you're not saying we need AI because everybody's talking about AI and that's just, once we get that, we can check it off and we're moving on. You're seeing it as, we have a specific use case that I'm going to try it. I'm going to iterate, knowing that I'm not going to get the perfect solution immediately, but I know that there's got to be something here. And if I just keep working on it, keep cracking on it, keep bringing in different perspectives, I'll be able to get to where I want it to be. And I mean, yeah, it's Mid-Journey didn't have when I first saw that business card, like, or the appeal of the picture isn't real, but the story is, right? It hit me. And obviously that image has stuck with me, but also the fact that there are other organizations who are dealing with poverty porn, and how do we get this message out? And also we can create use generative AI to create images, but do we have to tell people? Like, you are putting it front and center.
Well, yeah, and like I got to comment on the tell people. So in our day-to-day interaction with people, I don't say, Scott, I use a spell checker.
Right.
Okay. AI as a category, the tools that I'm generally talking about are just tools. They're like moving from the days of long division to the arrival of a calculator. I use a calculator, but I don't need to tell you every single time in everything I do, spoiler alert, I use the calculator. So the conversations that are like when I've been on the panels with Nathan, like it's usually we talk about ethics, and like I'm going to be counterpart. It's unethical to talk about ethics until you're all starting to use AI.
I love that. Can you say that again?
Because it is unethical to talk about ethics in AI until you start to use AI. It's not to say it's not important. It's critically important. But the throwing rocks, because every panel, and I'm sure Nathan can corroborate, that was the default place that every panel of the last 18 months has gone to. And yet, well, what about the potential? What about freeing up, making decent work more decent? What about so that's part of the reason we created the manifesto. So I'm a marketer by training. So I'm like, a policy is boring, a manifesto will get attention, and it did its job. But I wrote it more for my staff.
Yeah.
Which is a public statement to say, yes, we will use AI. This is how we will, how we won't. And it's not prescriptive. It's intended as boundaries of a sandbox. Within the sandbox that is Furniture Bank, we will experiment and do things, but we'll stay in this area. And I think everybody needs their own version of a manifesto. And that's the work that Fundraising AI did is great. It's the most human and accessible policy I came across, because at the time, go use Perplexity and find all of the policies. There's hundreds of them, but they all read like tax forms or things that large universities or hospitals, they love their big documents. But back to that 76% of nonprofits, they're never going to lean in and consider implementing it if we scare everybody to death. Because it's like, we're going to hold up the scientific calculator. Does it have to be scary? No. So the framework that you've got there is accessible. You can move at your own pace. You can use the parts of it that resonate with your organization. It's actually something your board will probably understand. Because I don't know what your board's like, but as a nonprofit board, you don't necessarily get people who are like AI experts. Right. You get lawyers and bankers and retirees. And I'm still teaching them like Internet Explorer 6 is not the way to go. But it's their choice. So when I put the manifesto in front of them, they understood it. They understood it from their role as the board at Furniture Inc. This is how our organization will use it. But every board is different. But we all should have it out there, because today, granted, I experiment with everything, but I was typing on the web, and there was Copilot little popped up, Jasper popped up, Grammarly popped up, HubSpot popped up. AI is everywhere at this point. That's generative. We've had predictive AI for 20 plus years, but it's already in the tools all nonprofits use, whether you like it or not. And that's like one of my bones of contention is pushing AI into tools doesn't make the tool better. You have to make the tool better because you've used AI. And I'm finding some of the different tools that we all use in our sector are actually less effective because they're trying to make you use this new feature.
And in that last sentence, you can replace tools with nonprofit organizations, right?
Yes.
Pushing AI into
Absolutely.
a nonprofit organization isn't going to make it better, but you can make it better by using AI. Right?
Absolutely.
And you've done many experiments with AI, which again, I love. I encourage anyone who's listening to do the same. Just try, just iterate. But two specifically, one is using the fundraising AI framework as your governance policy, which you already talked about, seeing a way to move forward there. But also, I love in 2022, you made the Furniture Bank's annual campaign solely supporting AI initiative. Can you talk to me about that? Like, what are you seeing with that? Where do you see that going? How is that making an impact already? And how was that received? Did you see a drop?
So the campaign, The Picture Isn't Real, The Reality Is, which showcased the stories of the clients that we support. At the time, it was fundraising, trying to cut through the clutter. We don't have a marketing budget per se. So it's that annual campaign trying to get attention. And the ask was to provide funding for clients. Mm-hmm. I'm going to get to your question. It wasn't explicitly, please give money so we can invest in AI. That's what we've done after that campaign. Okay. And I'll come back to the results of that one. But what we found was a subset of the donors who gave actually reached out to say, I gave you more because you're trying to innovate within a very narrow set of resources. Mm-hmm. Clever, etc. I had some media that pounced on it's still poverty porn, but I'm like, fine, I'll debate you in terms of but it did end up for the group that were actually curious to read, because we've created a very extensive editorial on what we did, why we did it, how to do it yourself. I'll send you the links. It's furniturebank.org/postcard, that campaign. And we've kept that up because it's just an example of what's possible. We're not even 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And then I switched it over to see, for the people who are interested in AI or funders or foundations or corporations, how important is it to give charities, nonprofits, and social purpose organizations extra financial resources to invest in innovating? Because we're fortunate, 80% of what we earn, we can make on our own by providing services to residential corporate governments. So if we created a little AI innovation fund internally, but when I went out to say, anybody want to help? I'm not finding anybody want to help. So granted, not every human being is coming to that page, but it's interesting because I find my business friends like, of course, charities should be using AI, just like we use it in business, because it will let us do many things. But the sector as a whole, that's why I was coming to the fundraising AI meetup. I'm like, wow, look at all these AI curious people in all of these different roles, as consultants, as platforms, as software. I got to meet Mina. It was like, who was in Vancouver. So we're literally opposite sides of the country. So everybody says it's urgent. I just air quoted, they say we should innovate. They say we should be digital. But I don't know what it's like in the US, but when I went looking for funders who are explicitly saying we want to encourage AI innovation, even if it's small, it's not about the magnitude of the money, but the encouragement to be innovative, it's missing. We use up here in Canada something called Grant Connect, which is the inventory of all the different foundations. 0 search results when it came to AI related. Wow. And down in the States, it's not a big number. It's maybe like 2 hands worth that will actually mention this transformational tool. And when I say transformational, it's the first invention in history that is affected the whole planet, regardless of race or economics or time zone, all at once. Like this is a completely unknown moment on how it will transform. That the tool didn't just come to Toronto first and then spread. It was available in Jakarta at the same time it was available to me. So the way it's being applied and innovated is moving at a rate we will probably never see ever again. Right. And that's what I worry about for our sector is we're not notoriously known for the quick pickup. But starting to learn and benefit from it is you can actually start and immediately start benefiting from it.
Today. Yeah. Yeah.
So whenever I'm one of those unpopular people at a dining room table, somebody mentions AI, my wife rolls her eyes and anybody's had to put up with me and I go into professor mode. But it's just read Ethan Mollick's Co-Intelligence. Yeah. It's probably the most accessible book. And I say accessible in that I can give it to my mom, and I did. She read it. She appreciated it. I gave it to my lawyer friend who is not technical. And my uncle, he made it part of his book club. So there's something about Ethan's, it's accessible to the non-technologist. So it's mandatory reading at Furniture Bank. It doesn't teach you anything. It just gives you the sandbox we all live in now. And then, yeah, ChatGPT is free now.
Yeah.
Try Perplexity, try Poe. Like there's all this free or worst case $1 a day investments. So I don't know where I could spend $1 a day.
Not even $1.
More,
right?
Yes.
67 cents a day.
Sorry. We're Canadians. It's everything's in US dollars and we always get the 35% tax. But yeah, to collide things, like I did a thought experiment a year ago. 10 different AI engines asking 4 questions. What is furniture poverty? What is furniture waste? What is furniture poverty? And what is a furniture bank? And how can a furniture bank help address furniture poverty through reducing furniture waste? And I wanted to see how each AI engine responded to the exact same questions. That was free. And in fact, that's one of the things I asked anybody who put up with me this long, if you get this far, is go try that for your organization. Yeah. You have social issues or environmental issues that if they changed, your charity wouldn't need to exist. So what do the models think about it? What does it know? And that's the other opportunity we as a sector have is we talk about bias, but our bias is actually just the training. So if our sector collectively prioritize getting our biases into the training models, there would be a bias and it would be representative of the social sector that we all collectively care about.
Right. And I just jumping back. So going to ChatGPT, again, for those that haven't used it, you can use it for free without even an account. You don't have to worry about giving the information. It's not like chat.openai.com. You can type in these questions, get responses in 10 seconds. Right. And
I think they even have it's the domain name chatgpt.com now.
Okay. I learned something new. This I think has been incredible. And Dan, I know that we're a bit longer than usual. I've loved having you on. I think that there's so much value that nonprofits, for-profits can learn from you. Just your exploration of it, your willingness to try new things, not worry about failure, about knowing that this is uncharted territory. And so let's start charting some things.
I don't think I'll be there this year, but 2022 was the picture is real. It isn't real, and the reality is. I think next year will be the video isn't real, but the reality.
I mean, the stuff that's coming out, yeah, I'm expecting that next year. Where can people find out more about you? Find out more about Furniture Bank?
Furniture Bank, we're based in Toronto and we support our cousins across Canada, and you can find us at furniturebank.org. If you go furniturebank.org/postcard, you can see that original campaign, and we put all of our little lessons and learnings around AI there. Find me on LinkedIn and look forward to chatting.
Great. And I know you mentioned Ethan Mollick, again, another great resource on LinkedIn, his book, Co-Intelligence. I think if you were to go through the 29 or however many episodes we've done of this podcast, you and Ethan are probably tied neck and neck for who we reference most often. But you're in good company. But again, thanks for joining. I love chatting with you. Everyone who's listening, if you got this far, thank you for joining us for another week. I hope you didn't miss Nathan too much. If you like it, subscribe, share, tell your friends. If you don't like it, I'll give you 67 cents, and you can still subscribe and share with your friends. All right. Thanks all. Reach out to us on LinkedIn with any questions you might have, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Scott.